All right, folks, this is Jack Antonio for Do You Know Jack Radio Show, and I'm honored to have my guest on the line with me today, Metal Blade Records founder Brian Slagel. Brian, how are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm great. Like I said, I'm just so deeply honored to be chatting with you now. I mean, like for yourself, is it a little surreal to sort of run the same gauntlet that a lot of your artists do?
Yeah, I do this about every 5 years when there's an anniversary. So yeah, I can commiserate with them now. I know how it is. But it's all good though.
Yeah, man. Well, now I know. The reason why we're talking is not only the 35th anniversary, but the fact that you've got a book coming out August 29th for the Sake of Heaviness, the history of Metal Blade Records. Now, I noticed that you got Mark Eglinton working with you. Was that a conscious decision to go with Mark?
Yeah, I have a few authors that I knew and done books in the past that I've been a part of. So talked to a bunch of different ones, but I really like Mark's attitude, and I like the way how he wanted to present the book and kind of his vibe about how it should go. So we just kind of clicked at that and went on and did it.
Yeah, now I know the format for this book is not only is it your words, but also several of the major players that have come and gone through the Metal Blade doors in 35 years. I would imagine that was by design then.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talked about how we wanted to read, we thought it kind of should be my voice, but it was really important to include as many of the people that we could that were around and get their thoughts just as a kind of mix it up. And also, just as a fan, I thought it would be cool to hear some words from various people. We were lucky enough to get so many great people that we worked with over all the years.
Yeah, now I guess the most obvious person that you're involved with is Lars, who wrote quite a glowing foreword and had a lot of great things to say about you.
Yeah, that was pretty humbling. I hate asking those guys for anything because they're obviously super busy, and this was also right when they're starting to put the record out and do promotion for the record. So I felt bad asking you to do it, but he was like, "Nope, no problem, I'll do it." And then his forward is extremely humbling. So I'm at a loss to words even what to say about it. Really, it's amazing.
Yeah. Now, reading the opening of this book, I mean, I think a lot of people understand that you've broke many bands over the years that we otherwise wouldn't have heard of, but including Metallica, who showed up on that first Metal Massacre record. But I mean, I guess I think as a fan myself, I didn't realize how tight you were with Lars in those beginning days.
Yeah, I mean that's why it's kind of fun to tell the story because I'm not sure. I mean, I think if you're a diehard Metallica fan, you probably heard the story there. But yeah, I mean that was just such kind of luck just to run into him and become friends with him before either of us ever in a million years thought we would do anything. We're just really young kids who are both fans of the same music, and the fact that both of us are still doing today what we started back then is definitely pretty surreal. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, now what I found amazing was the nature of which that Metal Massacre album came out, and the fact that you actually gave Lars your word that you would keep that slot open, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we were really good friends, and it's funny because he used to always threaten to start a band. He had a drum set in the corner of his room that wasn't even put together, just kind of sitting there, just all over the place. And he's like, "I'm going to start a band." And you're like, "Yeah, sure you are, Lars." And well, he said he would. I said, "All right, well." He's a very good friend of mine. I had no idea what it was going to be, but I figured he knew the right music, so. But he ended up putting together a pretty decent band, I think.
Yeah, now, this all started over sort of a mutual love and respect for those new wave of British heavy metal bands, did it not?
Yeah, I mean, he had just moved to L.A. from Denmark, and he was it was December of 1980, a Michael Schenker Group show in L.A. And actually, I didn't see him first, but my friend John Cornaren ran into him at that show, and he was wearing a Saxon European T-shirt. Now, nobody in L.A. aside from John and I knew who Saxon was, let alone was wearing a European T-shirt. So he went up there and said, "Where do you get that?" He said, "You know who Saxon is?" I said, "Yeah, you do." And he's like, so he said, "Oh, you got my friend Brian." Then a couple of days later, we all ended up hanging out and listening to music and just became really close friends after that. Just the bonding of the music. I think, we were just excited that we knew somebody else that knew about the music who also came from Europe with a different perspective. And I know Lars never in a million years thought he would move to L.A. and knew anybody that knew anything about this scene that was happening over there. So it was definitely friendship and bond started and created by music for sure.
Now, you sort of, cut your teeth, so to speak, going way back to Deep Purple's Machine Head. And I mean, a lot of people were sort of inspired by that record. But I mean, a little later on, you got your hands on that first Iron Maiden demo. Is that correct? Like you heard the very first Paul Di'Anno tapes?
Yeah, I was a tape trader, so I was really heavily into tape trading. I would tape live tapes and also the stuff all over the world. And a friend of mine in Sweden sent me an AC/DC live tape, and at the very end of it, he said, "Hey, there's this new band called Iron Maiden that just put something out that you might like, so here it is." He put the Soundhouse tape, which had just come out over there on the end of the tape, and I heard it. I was like, "Oh my God, this is truly amazing!" And then eventually, when the first Iron Maiden record came out, I was just blown away by, "Oh my God, this is the best metal thing I've ever heard." The cover and the way the band was, the imaging, the lyrical content, the whole thing to me was like, this is the perfect heavy metal band, and it really kind of got me super excited.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of that first self-titled Iron Maiden record myself. I mean, I love obviously the legacy that Bruce has left with the band, and I don't think there's any denying that. But there's just something about that early stuff with Di'Anno. I mean, you could just tell they were on the cusp of just something truly extraordinary, and they were totally leading that new wave of British heavy metal charge.
Yeah, I mean that. I was a huge metal fan obviously before then, but that to me was just everything about that record was just perfect. The style, the music, the lyrics, everything was just absolutely perfect. Yeah, Di'Anno had that kind of extra kind of gritty, almost kind of punky sort of vibe to it. And obviously I was a huge Paul Di'Anno fan, and still am of those first two records. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. Now, just thinking through that entire movement, I know you were heavily involved in hearing a lot of those records, and then even at one point you went down to England to check out a lot of it. I mean, in your estimation, as a person that's A&R'd and checked out a lot of bands over the years, I mean, what's one of the more underrated new wave of British heavy metal bands that you think in your estimation everybody should check out?
I mean, obviously one that you may know about is Holocaust, who put out a couple of really great records, but one of the more obscure bands that was one of my favorites that only released a couple of singles back then was a band called Mithra, Mythra. And I love their stuff. I thought they were truly one of the better bands of that team. And just, for whatever reasons, I'm still not even sure today whatever happened, but they didn't really end up. I think they eventually put out a record many, many, many years later, but the first they had an EP and a single, I guess, at the time. But that stuff was really great. But there were so many great bands back in the day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of great ones, Raven, famously took a Metallica out on their very first tour, the Kill 'Em All for One tour, I think it was called. Did you catch that tour?
Oh, absolutely. Yep. I'm a huge Raven fan forever. In fact, I interviewed them for my fanzine the first time I went to England, and it's a bit of a funny story because I couldn't understand anything they said. They, up in northern England, they speak so fast with such a heavy accent. I have no idea what they're saying. But yeah, I went to those shows, and they were amazing. I mean, Raven was phenomenal, and seeing Metallica play, getting better all the time was really great too.
Yeah, it's funny. I have my own funny Raven story. A few years ago when I first was going to interview John, I thought they still lived in England. I didn't realize they had moved over. He had to hilariously correct me on that.
Yeah, they're in New York. I don't think a lot of people know that. That's okay. I interviewed a long time ago. I had a radio show for many years, and I interviewed Foghat. And I had no idea they were English when they came in with the English accent. I thought you guys were like from Atlanta, Georgia or something. No, we're English. I said, oh, wow. Oops.
Yeah. Well, I mean, getting back to the whole Metal Blade thing, I mean, there was this real sort of logical progression where it started out with your obsessive new wave of British heavy metal fandom, and then you ended up working for Oz Records, and then the fanzine, and then the Metal Massacre compilation. And before you knew it, in a very short period of time, you were essentially running a record label out of your mom's garage. But I would imagine now, in all the 35 years that you've been doing this, you would have never thought that you'd still be going, or that it even would have gotten as far as it has, right?
Oh, God, no. If you would have told any of us back then that it would be even a hundredth as big as it is now, we all would have laughed at you and said you'd be completely crazy. I mean, it's mind-blowing. I mean, we were just doing it for the love of the music, not really ever thinking that it was going to be that big. I mean, back then it was so underground and so small. So, yeah, the fact that, all these bands have gotten so huge and we're all still doing this 35 years later is is very surreal, to say the least.
Yeah, and well, then you were right in the middle of that sort of LA scene, which at the time was kind of a hotbed for, the whole glam movement, and then punk rock was giving away to hardcore punk, and then in the middle of all of that was this sort of early thrash metal thing that was going on, and you also got over to the Bay Area and were checking out stuff. I mean, it must have been a fantastic time to just be checking out music in general.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely the right place at the right time. I mean, it's just phenomenal what was going on there, because you had all these kind of scenes happening where you had and it's funny because in the very early days of the metal scene, when Motley Crue and Rat and even Metallica and stuff, all these bands kind of coexisted because all was still pretty heavy. But then obviously Motley Crue and Rat kind of took a turn one way, and then a lot of these other bands, whether it was Steeler, Bitch, Armored Saint, Metallica, Slayer, kind of went the other way. So, but it was interesting to be in LA at that time because it was so much great music. I mean, we would go every weekend. There'd be great bands playing, and then we'd all go hang out afterwards. And it was a real special time in music back then that you don't see scenes like that happen as much anymore, which is a shame.
One thing I was amazed with this book, though, is, I mean, not only obviously have you, been responsible for, sharing and signing a lot of really great metal over the years, but you've also sort of, propped up different bands when they kind of needed that extra little encouragement. Like I'm thinking about how you sort of were responsible for putting Merciful Fate back together in the 90s, which, I mean, I just fucking love King Diamond and pretty much anything he does, but I mean, Merciful Fate, like, holy shit, like I don't even know what I would do if I met King Diamond. I think it would be like meeting Elvis for me.
Yeah, he's a very nice guy, so it'll be he's super down to earth and a good guy. But yeah, I mean, I was a huge Merciful Fate fan from day one. So when I met King and I'd become friends with him over all these years, and when they were kind of free agents, I thought I've kind of been bugging him for years about like, hey, is there any way we could get Merciful Fate back together? So when it actually happened, I was happy, but a little bit surprised at the same time. But super excited. I mean, unfortunately, it came out in all this stuff came out in the 90s when, people think metal was kind of dead or whatnot. But they put out a lot of really great records. And it's funny, now I talk to people who, because King Diamond's kind of at this big resurrection and is doing really well again. And they'll come and say, like, man, I forgot about those 90s King Diamond and Merciful Fate records. They're actually really good. I go, yes, they're really good. People need to go back and listen to that stuff again. So, but yeah, that was a huge thing for me to be able to get those guys to reform and tour and play a bunch of shows, because being a huge fan, it seems like they left way too early.
Yeah, now you do tell the story about Armored Saint and putting out their what some people would say is their sort of career defining record. But I mean, one thing that also really impresses me about things that you've done over the years is even a band like Believer, which I mean, that's sort of a really obscure band, but here just in the last 10 years or so, they put out a couple of really, really great sort of prog thrash albums with Metal Blade.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of so many different things, and I like, as much as you like to talk about the big records, but so many other stuff you put out that's really cool, from the kind of, like you said, more obscure stuff. So yeah, always fun to do those sort of things, and I'm glad you brought that up, because yeah, those records are really, really great.
Yeah, for sure. Well, now I think that's a big thing about Metal Blade, though, is you're sort of just uncompromising, right? I mean, this is the impression that I got just from reading the book, is that if you like something, you're willing to take a risk on it, and sometimes those risks pay off huge dividends, and other times you just make great music. But I mean, it's not necessarily about the dollars and cents, although I mean, that's obviously something that's got to fuel the label to a certain extent. But I mean, you've always had good hunches about bands and you've been willing to take risks, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, lucky enough over the years, the stuff that I like, other people seem to like as well. And yeah, definitely the money is not a motivating factor for me whatsoever. So we don't really look at things. I mean, obviously, like you said, it's a business, so you have to make the numbers work for you to stay going. But that's never been the motivating factor. It really is all about the music. And if there's something good out there, no matter whether we think it's going to sell 10 copies or 10,000, if it's good, we want to work with it.
Yeah, I love how in the last couple of years you worked with, bands like Mother Feather or, Igor, for instance, which I know is a band that you've sort of flagged as being something that's fresh and new and exciting.
I think we've always kind of tried to work with different things over the years, and that's what really kind of makes me, excited is cool, new, different stuff. And you mentioned Igor, which is cool, and Mother Feather, which are two bands that are definitely a lot different from anything else we do. We also have a band called If These Streets Could Talk. It's all instrumental with no vocals at all. Sorry. But heavy rhythms and these kind of orchestral guitars over it that I think is truly, truly amazing. So, and what's fun for me when you put that sort of stuff out, and people go, I never would have really liked that kind of band, but man, it's really cool. So, yeah, that's awesome.
But yet, like a movement like nu metal never turned your crank. But yet, I know that you liked and respected a lot of the grunge bands.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of scenes, like we never really got too much involved in the early kind of hair metal-y stuff, really necessarily, and definitely the nu metal thing. I love Korn, and the early Korn stuff is great. After that, I can't say that I got a lot of it, but yeah, I mean, the grunge stuff I really like. Cause I think the funny thing about that is that all those bands were hugely influenced by heavy metal. Like if you talk to Lane Staley, Jerry Cantrell, or Chris Cornell, any of those guys were all massive fans of true metal. Mm-hmm. And one of Billy Corgan's favorite bands of all time is Merciful Fate and King Diamond. So there you go. Awesome. But they couldn't say any of that. They weren't allowed to talk about metal because it was kind of, metal at that point was kind of a joke. And, so for us to work with it, we were like, it's a natural progression. I mean, Alice in Chains to me was a metal band. They just, were part of that movement, or, pick one of your bands. I mean, some of the Smashing Pumpkins stuff is crazy heavy. So it was fun for us to work with those sort of things. But there was a couple things over the years that we didn't really necessarily get involved with. But
Yeah. Well, I was thinking now as you were talking about the metal influence. I mean, I know there's this famous quote by Kurt Cobain where he said, people asked them, what's Nirvana's sound, and he said it was like the Pixies being molested by Black Sabbath. But I mean, I think that Sabbathy influence comes from the fact that Dale of the Melvins, which is an extremely underrated band, by the way, was actually in Nirvana for like a very short period of time.
Yeah, exactly. And all those bands, and the Melvins, yeah, amazing. I've seen them a bunch of times. It's such an amazing band. And, yeah, all the influences from all those bands, they come from just a lot of different areas. But certainly the grunge scene, to me, I think the bottom element of all it was really good, well played, heavy music with just a different, just the lyrics and the kind of the image was a little bit different.
Yeah, for sure. Well, now just getting back into the music end of it as well. I mean, you obviously still get out and scout and check out a lot of bands. I mean, do you have like, and I know you've said this in other interviews where it's kind of like, if you like something, you'll just go for it. But I mean, like, how do you define what you like? I mean, like, how do you know that it's something that's going to, turn your crank, so to speak?
Well, that's the thing is I really have literally no idea. There's no formula to it. And there's I can't really describe how it is. It's just I'll hear something and I'll like it. And that's really the bottom line. I do tend to like if for example, if there's a lot of bands that sound like Black Dahlia Murder for some reason, wouldn't really want to sign a bunch of that because we already have Black Dahlia Murder. I like that sound, but I want to try to hear something new and something different. So I think the only kind of underlying factor there is if somebody's doing something new and different and fresh, or just a different take on something, then that's what be it. But ultimately, it's just kind of one of those gut feelings. You put something in, sounds good, and I like it, and then we want to work with it. And luckily, my taste seems to be similar to a lot of other people's taste, so other people tend to like it.
That's kind of almost that old school, 70s FM radio approach to things, where disc jockeys used to just throw something against the wall, and if people liked it, they would like it. I mean, there wasn't any of this, choosing playlists by focus group and, so on and so forth. And I think, maybe to a certain extent, some record labels have also sort of maybe fallen into that trap, but you guys never have.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly one reason why we've been around for so long is, we tend to not get too involved in a particular scene or a particular style of doing things. And you also have to embrace whatever's coming, whatever the future is, because if you don't do that, a lot of people don't, I don't want to change, I want to do this. It's like, I'm the opposite. Like, okay, what's coming? Let's embrace this. Let's use whatever it is to our benefit and figure out how to make it work for us.
Yeah. Now, you've mentioned the future of the industry in general and maybe record labels is more in brand building, which I found like a really interesting part of the book that you talk about at the end.
Yeah, I think look, it's evolved. Record labels and their involvement in artists' lives now have evolved quite a bit from what it was before. And, a lot of people ask me like, well, couldn't a band do it themselves? It's like, well, technically, certainly they could. They could record it themselves. They could somehow get some sort of distribution. But what you get when you come to a label is you have and everybody that works at our label are huge fans of the music, and we all wear a lot of different hats, and we kind of tend to more be into the marketing and promotion aspects of things more than anything else. But you come to Metal Blade, you have 27 people that work for Metal Blade all around the world that are only about bettering your band, and then all of our partners, between Sony and everything else, so there's hundreds of other people. So you have hundreds of people working for your band to try to get you to that next level, and working with agents and managers all together to really build up the brand of the band. It sounds super corporate, but the attitude is if you make the band's brand as big as humanly possible, then they'll sell more concert tickets, more T-shirts, more music, more all of the above. And you're certainly seeing with the streaming services coming in and being real and providing real money now. Finally, that the future looks pretty bright, I think, for the music business.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, the book is called For the Sake of Heaviness, The History of Metal Blade Records. It is penned by this man that I have on the phone, Brian Slagel, with, of course, help from acclaimed music author Mark Eglinton. And it's, like I said, all about the history of Metal Blade, and it's got a lot of interesting little tidbits of information probably that maybe hasn't been out there until now. So, Brian, I really appreciate you just taking the time out to chat about the book for me, man. It's coming out August 29th.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks.